aunt once said military life was for people who lacked direction. My stepfather called it a phase. My cousin Blake snorted that no one takes women in uniform seriously. None of them knew that while they were busy mocking me behind silk napkins and wine glasses, I was becoming one of the youngest colonels in the U.S. Air Force, at age 36. And tonight, while they toasted each other at the Hawthorne family estate in Scottsdale, Arizona, I was listening. The annual Hawthorne dinner was in full swing. Baccarat crystal, dry-aged steaks, and bragging rights passed around like side dishes. Everyone had gathered to celebrate Blake's new executive role at Argent Wealth Partners, the same firm where my stepfather had once served as president. In their world, real success wore cufflinks and corner offices. Director of Client Strategy by 34, my stepfather boomed with pride, lifting his glass. That's the Hawthorne ambition in action. I sat quietly, swirling my water, remembering every time he'd told me I was squandering my Ivy League degree, how I'd broken tradition by trading a fast-track finance job for fatigues. 13 years of service, dozens of accolades, 3 overseas deployments, a Bronze Star. But in this room, I was still just the girl who'd walked away from a proper career. "So, Elena," my Aunt Laurel asked with an arched brow, "still chasing planes and pretending to be GI?" I met her gaze. "Still serving, yes." Before I could say more, my mother jumped in with a strained smile. "Elena's doing back-end support now, isn't that right, dear? Working with tech or something?" By working with tech, she meant overseeing a top-secret cybersecurity unit that had just intercepted a foreign breach attempt on national defense infrastructure. But they didn't know that. They weren't cleared to. And I wasn't about to start justifying myself to a table full of people who never really listened. "What a waste," Uncle Craig sighed, slicing his fillet. "With your background, you could have made partner by now. Maybe even started your own firm." Blake lifted his wineglass, flashing his polished grin. "Still time, Elena. If you want something more substantial, I could pull some strings, maybe get you a spot on our junior analyst team. Would be a nice change of pace from, drills and push-ups." Laughter rippled across the table. I tightened my grip on the glass, not because I was embarrassed, but because I was remembering the briefing I had led 3 days ago at the Pentagon, the operation I would command at dawn tomorrow, the quiet call from the Secretary of Defense that morning, thanking me personally for my discretion and leadership. "Some folks just aren't built for boardrooms," my stepfather said with a sigh. "The military's fine, respectable even, as long as you don't confuse it for a real career." "A fallback," my mother added, nodding as if the matter were settled. "Some structure for those who don't quite fit in elsewhere." I smiled then, not with resentment, but with clarity. They wouldn't understand, and they didn't have to. Let them toast Blake and his high-rise view. I had satellites. What they couldn't see, couldn't even imagine, was that while they clinked glasses in a private dining room, I was already in command of systems protecting them all. They had no idea that Argent Wealth Partners, my stepfather's pride and joy, had spent the last 6 months desperately trying to secure a federal cybersecurity contract, a contract that now sat squarely on my desk. Tomorrow morning, I'd be leading the panel reviewing their bid. "I heard they're letting women lead platoons now," my cousin Sienna chimed in, her voice dripping with patronizing charm. "Maybe you could get a little promotion, Elena, work your way up to, what do they call it, sergeant?" I bit back a correction. Sienna had once confused the Navy and the Air Force, and still thought clearance referred to retail sales. Let them talk. Tomorrow would speak louder than I ever could. "Oh, actually," my mother added, her tone shifting like a weather vane, "Elena's old friend James just launched a startup. He's single now. Maybe it's time you started thinking about a real future. A husband, a home." "James?" As in Major General James Holden, my commanding officer, mentor, and recently divorced from his husband of 8 years. He'd also be walking into tomorrow's meeting, leading the federal oversight team for contract compliance. "I'm focused on my career right now," I said simply, smiling into my glass. My stepfather scoffed. What career? You mean pushing paper for Uncle Sam? Elena, you could have been someone. You had potential. I stood slowly and set my napkin down. Early morning tomorrow. Of course, Blake grinned. Don't want to be late for inspection. As I crossed the room, my stepfather called out. One day you'll regret walking away from everything we offered you. The Hawthorne name used to mean something. I paused at the front door, my hand on the brass handle. Tomorrow it'll mean something again, just not the way you think. Outside, the desert air had cooled, stars scattered above the red rock silhouettes of the mountains. I slipped into my car, pulled out my secure phone, and dialed. Status update, I asked. All set for 900, Colonel, came the crisp reply from James Holden. Argent's proposal is still riddled with security flaws. Their team has no idea how exposed they really are. Perfect, I said. Let's do this by the book. I want every loophole documented. Yes, ma'am. Though, part of me still thinks you should have told them. I looked at the glowing estate shrinking in my rearview mirror. They'll find out soon enough. Back in my apartment, far from the modest base housing they assumed I lived in, I stepped onto the balcony of my 12th-floor penthouse overlooking downtown Phoenix. The skyline gleamed beneath a blanket of midnight stillness. Inside, I opened my laptop and reviewed the files one last time. Argent system vulnerabilities were staggering. Their outdated encryption left them wide open. They needed this contract to survive, though no one at tonight's dinner knew just how critical it was. My phone buzzed. A message from Blake. Seriously, think about that analyst job, sis. Could be fun working with real professionals. I chuckled, powered down my screen, and poured a glass of wine. Tomorrow, the Hawthorns would finally understand that I didn't need their invitations or approval. I had something far more valuable. Authority, strategy, and control over the very empire they thought they ruled. And soon, they'd be signing the deal I designed, on my terms. If you're as curious as I am to see how tomorrow's boardroom reckoning unfolds, make sure you subscribe. You won't want to miss the moment the Hawthorns realize who really holds the power now. Better than wasting your life playing soldier? My stepfather's words still echoed in my mind. I set the phone aside and opened my laptop, pulling up the classified report that would reshape the future of Argent Wealth Partners by 900 hours. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's giving them enough silence to figure it out themselves. In my walk-in closet, behind the sleek dresses and soft blouses they thought defined my life, hung a single uniform, my dress blues, pressed and immaculate. Each medal gleamed in the low light, each ribbon a reminder of the sacrifices and victories no one at that dinner table would ever understand. Tomorrow I wouldn't be Elena Hawthorne, the family deviation. I'd be Colonel Lena Hawthorne, commander of the Air Force Cyber Defense Command, the person reviewing and potentially rejecting the contract that Argent Wealth desperately needed. My stepfather loved to say the Hawthorne name carried weight in Phoenix. He wasn't wrong. He just didn't know how much heavier it would feel when it came stamped on federal rejection papers. On my desk was a photo of me at 18, newly accepted to the Air Force Academy. My family stood beside me, smiling too stiffly, the pride not quite reaching their eyes. That night, I promised myself that one day, they would know what I was truly capable of. That day was now measured in hours. The next morning, I arrived at Argent's corporate tower an hour early. My uniform was flawless. Polished brass, sharp creases, calm confidence. The security guard at the front desk glanced up, paused, and then did a double take. Colonel Hawthorne, he asked. Are you? Yes, I said, holding up my ID. I'm the stepdaughter of Alexander Hawthorne. He straightened, almost tripping over his own words. Ma'am? Major General Holden is waiting for you upstairs. I took the executive elevator to the 40th floor. As a girl, I'd visited this office countless times. It had seemed like the throne room of a king. Today, it was just another battleground. James stood at the far end of the conference room, posture crisp, expression unreadable. You ready for this, Colonel? Born ready, sir, I said, flipping through the last page of the contract dossier. At 8:45, the board members began to arrive, flashes of Rolexes and designer suits. perfectly practiced smiles. My stepfather walked in last, deep in conversation with Blake. Neither noticed me standing by the projection screen. "Let's begin," Alexander said, settling at the head of the table. "We're here to discuss the cybersecurity proposal. Our technical division has outlined—" "Actually," James interrupted, standing, "this meeting will be conducted by the Cyber Defense Command. Colonel?" I stepped forward. My stepfather froze. Blake's expression collapsed into confusion. Chairs shifted. Coffee cups trembled slightly in midair. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady, clear, and command-ready. "I'm Colonel Elena Hawthorne. I oversee strategic cybersecurity operations for national infrastructure and defense partnerships. We're here to discuss your system vulnerabilities and what your firm must address before any further contract consideration." The silence was absolute. I met my stepfather's eyes, watching the realization flicker. Not anger, not disbelief, recognition. "Elena?" my stepfather sputtered, his voice cracking under the weight of recognition. "What is this?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I clicked the wireless remote, bringing the classified security report onto the massive wall screen behind me. "3 months ago," I began, "our division detected multiple breach attempts, targeting Argent Wealth's infrastructure. Foreign cyber actors were probing your servers, attempting to access client data, internal communications, and proprietary algorithms." The boardroom shifted, eyes darted to each other, chairs creaked. Blake was no longer smirking. He was staring at the metals pinned to my chest, like he was seeing me in full color for the first time. "Your current systems," I said, flipping to the next slide with deliberate calm, "are inadequate." Gasps rippled around the room as visuals of the vulnerability maps filled the screen. Heat signatures, trace attempts, known exploits, all color-coded and undeniable. "The contract you're hoping to secure," I continued, "isn't just a line item or a handshake deal. This touches national infrastructure. It's about defense, stability, public trust." "Colonel Hawthorne?" One board member finally managed, his voice tight. "What are our options?" My stepfather tried to cut in, desperate to reassert control. "Wait just a second. Elena, you can't just march in here and—" "That's Colonel Hawthorne, Mr. Vice President," James said sharply from the end of the table, "and yes, she absolutely can. In fact, she's the only one who can authorize this contract." I laid the final folder on the polished table, detailing what compliance would require: a complete overhaul of security architecture, third-party audits, staff vetting, and monthly vulnerability assessments conducted by my team. The cost made a few board members pale. "But let me be clear," I added. "If Argent chooses not to comply, Cyber Defense Command will be forced to classify your company as a federal security risk." A silence deeper than disbelief settled over the table. That would mean immediate termination of all existing government contracts and a blacklisting across federal agencies. My stepfather's jaw tensed. He understood exactly what that would mean. The end of Argent Wealth as he knew it. "You have 24 hours to decide," I said calmly. The board began to shuffle out in stunned silence. James gave me a small nod and followed them. My stepfather remained seated, staring at me like a ghost had walked into his conference room. Blake lingered near the door, wide-eyed and wordless. "All this time," my stepfather murmured, "you were—" "A colonel," I said. "Head of cyber operations. The one holding your company's future in my hands." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I met his eyes evenly. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have dismissed it like everything else I've done?" Blake stepped forward, voice quieter now. "Elena, I didn't know." "Clearly," I replied, gathering the last of my documents. "And that analyst position you offered?" I glanced at him over my shoulder. "I make 3 times your salary. That's just base pay." As I turned to leave, my stepfather stood abruptly, still trying to find the footing he'd lost. "Sir, wait. Perhaps we could discuss this as family," my stepfather said quietly, the fire gone from his voice. I turned back, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Family? Last night you said I'd never amount to anything, that I was wasting my potential. I let the silence settle before finishing. Well, this is my potential. This is who I am. And right now, I'm not your stepdaughter. I'm a colonel doing her job. From the doorway, James appeared. Ready, Colonel? The Joint Chiefs are expecting us. Joint Chiefs, Blake whispered, like the words had cracked something open inside him. Yes, I replied. Turns out pushing papers in the military office leads somewhere after all. That evening my phone lit up like a fireworks display. My mother, suddenly full of pride. My Aunt Laurel, apologizing for her comments at dinner. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years, asking if I could help their kids get into the Air Force. Ignored every message and poured a glass of Cabernet, watching the lights of downtown Phoenix glitter from my penthouse balcony. The same one they assumed I couldn't afford on a soldier's salary. 1 week later, Argent Wealth signed the contract, the largest in their history. The board quietly replaced my stepfather, encouraging him to take an early retirement. Blake's department? First in line for a full cybersecurity audit. I didn't attend the contract signing. I was in Washington briefing Congress on national infrastructure vulnerabilities. Later, my stepfather sent an email, an attempt to explain, to apologize. I was wrong, he wrote. You've become something I never imagined. I replied with 2 lines. I didn't become something. I always was something. You just couldn't see it. 2 months later, I received my promotion. Brigadier General, the youngest in Air Force history. At the ceremony, I stood beneath vaulted ceilings while senators, senior commanders, and dignitaries from around the world looked on. My family sat quietly in the back row. My mother wept. My stepfather looked like someone had erased all his certainty. Blake actually saluted, awkwardly and completely wrong, but it was something. At the reception, a young lieutenant approached. General Hawthorne, your speech about following your own path, it really hit me. My family doesn't support my service either. I smiled, thinking of the photo on my desk. 18 years old, in uniform, while my family frowned behind me. Let me tell you a story, I said. It starts with a family dinner where they told me I'd never be anything. He listened, and I spoke. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. Behind us, the reception buzzed with powerful voices and polished shoes. Through the window, I saw my family huddled at their table, still strangers to this world I'd built. Sometimes success isn't about proving others wrong. Sometimes it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes, the path everyone warns you against is exactly the one you were meant to walk. I touched the star on my shoulder and smiled. I was just getting started. If my story spoke to something in you, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told your path was a mistake, then leave a comment below. Tell me what they said you'd never become, and what you're becoming anyway. I read every word. And if you're walking your own road right now, keep going. Quiet strength doesn't need applause to be powerful. Subscribe if you're ready to rise, to prove yourself right, and to stand tall even when no one's clapping yet. Because sometimes the world won't believe in you until you show them who you've been all along.